Review copy provided by Nintendo. When Dragon Quest Builders was originally released, it somehow found a balance of mixing crafting gameplay from Minecraft with the core JRPG mechanics of Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest Builders 2 feels like a refinement to that formula. It's a JRPG at its core with a fleshed out building system along with some quality of life improvements. Just how the original Dragon Quest Builders followed the plot of Dragon Quest, Builders 2 follows the same story beats of Dragon Quest Builders 2. Sadly for veterans, that means that a lot of the big story elements here are spoiled for you. However, if you've come this far without playing Dragon Quest 2 yet, then feel free to jump in blindly. As for the premise, you wake up in a world where builders are generally looked down upon, and so it's up to you to lead the way for builders around the world. On your journey, you'll meet some new faces like your comrade Malroth, who can't remember their past but pledges to help you on your mission anyway. A lot of the story is just told through straight up mission dialogue. NPCs will come to you with build requests, further elaborating on their backgrounds and progressing the story. Admittedly, it's written with a more young audience focus than the original Dragon Quest II, and I think it's most apparent in the writing of these NPC characters. Even at 23 years old though, I didn't find the story to be too childish for me to enjoy. It just won't win any outstanding writing awards from me. It will win one of the most packed story awards for me though. It's hard for me to say just how much length this game has because across the many quests you have to do on 3 main islands, this can easily take you 50 to 80 hours to complete, depending on how well you are at resource management. Either way, Dragon Quest Builders 2 takes you on a fun and lengthy adventure, filled with plenty of throwbacks for those of you that grew up with the series. If you played the original Dragon Quest Builders, then you'll feel right at home here with the sequel. There are multiple changes with this follow-up, but just about everything here feels like a quality of life improvement that streamlines the gameplay. Don't worry though, if you're watching this review without a clue of what Dragon Quest or Builders is about, you're perfectly fine jumping into this series as the entry point. For those of you that have played the series before, whether it's Dragon Quest or the first Builders game, you'll be treated with plenty of references and Easter eggs to tickle your fancy. The minimap is quite literally the map of the original NES games adapted to match the cube overworld. It looks like a mix of Minecraft and Dragon Quest. In a way, it actually ends up looking like the pixel art just blown up into 3D. Encompassing this world are creatures and monsters straight out of Dragon Quest. Even in this visual style, these mobs and elements translate over well. What doesn't translate over well is the combat. It's as hack and slash as it gets with very little strategy. Big monsters have slow animations with heavy damage. Run around them to avoid them and smash the attack button, and that's about it. It doesn't really seem that thought out. That was certainly one of the more weaker points of Dragon Quest Builders 2. Now, like I said before, if you played the first Builders game, you'll feel right at home here. You and Malroth wake up on an island and begin to work on your camp. Slowly as you win over the hearts of the NPCs on the island, they'll give you requests to build certain projects. Completing these projects in return earns you more credit with the villagers, and that attracts more NPCs to join your camp. They feel like Pikmin in a way, a workforce that can work independently of you. The most apparent change players of the first game will notice though would be the changes to the everyday stuff. The tools you're using don't wither out anymore, they last forever. With the press of the A button, you can quickly swap between a hammer to destroy, a bucket of water, and some gloves to move around objects. Holding down the shoulder button now lets you dash around the open fields. Essentially, a lot of the nitpick problems from the first game have been fixed. With that said, there still are some things that can use some work here. Controls, for example, can still feel a bit clunky. Pressing the A button switches your tools, but it also acts as the button that starts conversations with characters. I could be trying to build something close to an NPC and then get stuck reading the same conversation over and over again just trying to switch tools. Luckily, there's a lot more fun to be had than annoyances here. Having NPCs give me quests to do gave each new build a more significant meaning. I didn't find that it took away from my creativity because I was still allowed to build whatever I want. However, completing these objectives further unlocked new materials and recipes that only further fueled my eagerness to explore and build. And luckily there's a lot of both. You arrive on the island at the start of the game, but that's really only one of 3 major islands, each with their own environment types. What I particularly loved about exploring these islands was just how the more I got into the endgame, the more the gameplay fleshed out with puzzles and even platforming areas too. It didn't lean on one of its genres more than the other, and instead found a balance of both. Dragon Quest Builders 2 is charismatic with an adorable visual style at every corner. The blocky design of the environment feels ripped out of Minecraft, but mixed in with some classic Dragon Quest, it feels like a 3D look at the sprites of the original game. It's a world that allured me to explore it, to peek into its caves, navigate its swamps, and mount the tallest structures. Akira Toriyama's character designs look beautiful in this world, and being able to create my own little character in it was a delight. The traditional third-person camera view is still the default option here, but now with the press of the left analog stick you can switch over to a first-person view. It was cool to mess around with at first, but the practicality of it didn't really last. Instead, I played mostly in third person and then switched over to first person anytime I wanted a closer look inside buildings. Moving on to performance, it's going to vastly differ depending on your platform. On PS4, you can expect a solid 1080p 60 for both a sharp and smooth picture throughout the adventure. The same can't be said for the Switch version. Unlike the first game, Builders 2 runs at an unlocked 30 frames per second at 1080p. Sure, the picture is sharp, but the frame rate here is very noticeable. While most of the time the frame rate hovers around the 30 frames per second mark, it'll occasionally dip into the 25 frames and even up to 35 to 40. It's inconsistent when you start to have more enemies and characters on screen across a wide open field. As for the handheld mode, that's more locked down to 720p 30fps performance. The frame rate dips are still there, just not as frequent, making the handheld mode the more ideal mode to play in. When switching between the PS4 and the Switch, the difference is night and day, though I think if you plan on playing on the Switch, you can get away with it. I would describe it like Minecraft on PlayStation Vita. It's not the best way to play, but it's playable. Like the previous Builders games, Dragon Quest Builders 2 chooses to reuse the music from the first game that reused the music from the core JRPG games. Sure, it would have been great to see some new work on this title, but Dragon Quest's music stands the test of time and it continues to with Builders 2. However, if you do end up extending your playthrough for up to 80 hours and you do it in a short period of time like I did, I can see that music overstaying its welcome. I do enjoy the references to previous games though. Having the victory theme play whenever I leveled up never stopped being adorable. Dragon Quest Builders 2 truly refines the series formula. Worlds are grander, tools are streamlined to work more efficiently, and its gameplay is enthralling. Controls can still use a bit of work and the Switch version is a bit lacking in performance, but throughout my time reviewing this, I couldn't put it down. Dragon Quest Builders 2 is both a great JRPG and a great open world game. It's an ambitious game, and while it doesn't always reach its goals, its effort is admirable and well worth digging into.